Well, good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well. And welcome to the Dallas Meditation Center and the Awakening Heart community of mindful living. We come here via YouTube every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central. And good to see so many of you here again this week, and look forward to meditating with you. And just a little bit of business before we get started. Those of you who tuned in last week and may have missed the talk because YouTube booted us a couple of times, that talk is on our YouTube channel. It was recorded, so you'll get part of Bobby's meditation and the talk. And just a little bit of instruction today. If we get booted, here's what you do. We will try to restart the stream, which means you should go back to our channel on YouTube and look for a new video and join that way. And if it boots us a few times or we can't get a stream started, then we will go to Zoom. So join us on Zoom. I will post that link here in a second. So just in case they want to, if we get booted early, you have the link early. So copy it and have it ready. And that'll be the same link that we will meet with afterwards for sharing and discussion. I'm typing now to put that in there. There, so you should see it in the chat. And I welcome you to check in on the chat. And hello, James, and hello, Ellen, Barbara, Catherine, John. And please do like and thumb up the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And so let's begin with 3 sounds of the bell, just resting and listening deeply to the sounds of 3 bells. Well, hello again, everyone. Glad you're here with us. And I see a few more people have dropped in. So hello to Heather and Jane. And over this past week, we sent you email. This whole month is about creativity, and we have little projects to do each week. And so last week, several of you sent in gathas and haiku. This week, it was mandalas, drawing mandalas, and Anne did a video, and hopefully you watched that video. If not, check your email. It was in our weekly, and you can watch the video, and it's never too late. She started a few mandalas for you, and it's just your project to finish, and you can finish them however much you want. You can color them, you can just draw, whatever you like. And so we'd love to see what you created. So please do email us, take a photo of it or scan it and email it to us. That would be great. And like I said, the gathas and the haiku, you can send in at any time. There's no deadline. So let's say our opening affirmation together. Many of you know it. And if you don't, you can listen along. And we repeat this each week. Hello, Michael, Jennifer, and Billy. Awakening Heart Opening Affirmation. Noble community, we gather here now to honor the way of peace and nonviolence, the way of wisdom and compassion, the way of joy and beauty. In solidarity with one another, with all humanity, and with all life on earth. Friends on the path, we gather here now to deepen our solidity like a mountain and to renew our freshness like a flower. Through mindful sitting and walking, mindful singing and breathing, and mindful speaking and listening. Family of awakening, we gather here now to celebrate the one infinite light that shines through many religions and many cultures, to cultivate the wisdom of our many teachers, both ancestral and contemporary, and to affirm the capacity within ourselves and all persons of every race, gender, orientation, and tradition to realize full and complete enlightenment. Oh, hello, Miles. So tonight we will do our usual practice of a guided meditation, and you are welcome to sit. You can lie down, or you can even do walking meditation during the guided meditation if you would like. And then after that, we will have a talk. And I'm Cornell. I'm joined tonight by Bobby, who will do our guided meditation, Anne, who will do our talk, and Lisa, who is our bellmaster. And so if you're new to the practice and you've just tuned in to YouTube, found us and wondering what this is about, well, just know it's easy to follow along, and we'll offer some guidance. And it's really about awareness and coming back to your breath. It's pretty simple, intentionally beginner-friendly meditation, guided meditation. So just sit back, and I think we'll chant the Medicine Buddha mantra before our guided meditation. So I'm going to let you look at our altar here. There you go. You can enjoy the candles and the altar. Namo Bhagavate Vaishesha Guru Vaiduriya Prabharajaya Tathagataya Arhate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Om Vaisheshe Vaisheshe Maha Vaisheshe Rajasamudgate Swaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaishesha Guru Vaiduriya Prabharajaya Tathagataya Arhate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Om Vaisheshe Vaisheshe Maha Vaisheshe Rajasamudgate Swaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaishesha Guru Vaiduriya Prabharajaya Tathagataya Arhate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Om Vaisheshe Vaisheshe Maha Vaisheshe Rajasamudgate Swaha.
So as we begin our guided meditation, I invite you to find a comfortable place to sit or lie down. Maybe begin with a couple of nice, deep cleansing breaths. And then just return to your normal breath, letting your attention just sort of normally go to the breath. In this guided meditation, we're going to contemplate the 5 precepts, which we also know as the 5 mindfulness trainings. So you'll hear some instruction or something to contemplate, and then you'll hear a bell that signals a few minutes for you to concentrate on what was suggested. Aware of the suffering brought about by killing, I breathe in. Determined not to kill, not to uphold killing or to allow others to kill, I breathe out. Aware that killing brings suffering, determined not to kill. Aware that killing brings suffering, determined not to kill. Aware that killing brings suffering, determined not to kill. Aware of the suffering brought about by exploitation, stealing, and injustice in society, I breathe in. Determined not to take anything which belongs to others, I breathe out. Aware that stealing and injustice brings suffering, determined not to steal. Aware that stealing and injustice brings suffering, determined not to steal. Aware that stealing and injustice brings suffering, determined not to steal. Aware of the suffering brought about by sexual misconduct, I breathe in. Determined not to engage in sexual misconduct, I breathe out. Aware that sexual misconduct brings suffering, determined not to engage in sexual misconduct. Aware that sexual misconduct brings suffering, determined not to engage in sexual misconduct. Aware that sexual misconduct brings suffering, determined not to engage in sexual misconduct. Aware of the suffering brought about by unmindful speech, I breathe in. Determined to learn to listen to others and to speak words that are constructive and bring harmony, I breathe out. Aware of unmindful speech brings suffering. Determined to listen deeply and speak mindfully. Aware that unmindful speech brings suffering. Determined to listen deeply and speak mindfully. Aware that unmindful speech brings suffering, determined to listen deeply and speak mindfully. Aware of the suffering brought about by drugs and other toxins, I breathe in. Determined not to use drugs and other toxins, I breathe out. Aware that drugs and toxins bring suffering, determined not to use drugs and toxins. Aware that drugs and other toxins bring suffering, determined not to use drugs and other toxins. Aware that drugs and other toxins bring suffering, determined not to use drugs and other toxins. Seeing how the 5 wonderful precepts protect me, the people around me, and all species, I breathe in. Determined to practice the precepts for my whole life in order to protect myself as well as others and all species, I breathe out. 5 wonderful precepts protecting me and all other species, determined to practice deeply. 5 wonderful precepts protecting me and all other species, determined to practice deeply. Five wonderful precepts protecting me and all other species, determined to practice deeply. May all beings be happy.
May all beings be happy.
May all beings be free.
May all beings be free.
May all beings be joyful.
May all beings be joyful.
May all beings be at peace.
May all beings be at peace.
Brahma-vihara Maitri.
Brahma-vihara Maitri.
Brahma-vihara Karuna.
Brahma-vihara Karuna.
Brahma-vihara Mudita.
Brahma-vihara Mudita.
Brahma-vihara Upeksha.
Brahma-vihara Upeksha.
May all beings be happy.
May all beings be happy.
May all beings be free.
May all beings be free.
May all beings be joyful.
May all beings be joyful.
May all beings be at peace.
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 May all beings be at peace. Thank you, Bobby, for leading us in that guided meditation. And thank you, all of you, for being here together too, even though not in the same space. Our meditation together matters, and it does create ripples of change, and brings hope, brings many good qualities to our own lives, and affects those around us. So thank you very much. So allow yourself to stretch a little bit. Stretch the shoulders, the arms. And hello to some of you who joined us during that. I'm not sure who is already here, so I'll just say hello to Billy, Julie, Miles, Denise, Paula, Luis. Yeah, good to see you. And Denise, if you're still here, we are live. Anyway, so let's recite, or you can listen, the three jewels of our practice. I will just read them to you. Our three jewels of our practice are these qualities that are already within us, which is the quality of enlightenment and realization, the quality of learning and teaching, and the quality of coming together in community and supporting each other in our path. We take refuge in the Buddha, the awakening heart of infinite light, that which shows us the way in this life. We take refuge in the Dharma, the awakening path of infinite light, the way of understanding and of love. We take refuge in the Sangha, the awakening community of light, those who live in harmony and awareness. And so for any of you who are new to just arrived or something, just a reminder, after the talk and after we sign off here, we will get together on a Zoom meeting to have a little bit of FaceTime with each other and share. So I hope that many of you will come over to that afterwards. And that link is way at the top of the chat. You can find it there, and then I'll probably drop it into the chat again before we finish up. But now continuing with on our topic of creativity for this month, I'll introduce our speaker, Anne.
Hi. Well, before I jump into our talk tonight, I've been instructed, and I will ask about your homework that Bobby mentioned in the email about making mandalas this week. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can print out the PDF that has two baby mandalas on there, one that's already started and one that's already finished, and you can fill in accordingly. I also included a video with some guidance about how you might go about that. Or you can just make it whatever you want. There's no rules. As Bobby said, the important thing is setting an intention to make it sacred, make it yours, and go from there. And you can certainly start one that's brand new just by making a circle. And it doesn't even have to be started from the center. You can do it asymmetrically if you like. So play around with that. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with. So please send them in. We're all excited about it. And as Bobby mentioned earlier too, you can continue to send in your gathas and haikus, and we look forward to keeping this creativity train going all month long. And with that, so I've been sitting with the notion of creativity and art as a practice and the value in it. I think it's safe to say that we are creative beings. And it's maybe easiest to see this in children. I don't know if you've ever stopped and have watched children play before, or if you can think back to moments when you were immersed in making something in some kind of creative project, and that feeling of being completely absorbed in it, especially as a kid. And the beautiful thing is that we never lose that connection. However, I think that we can and do block ourselves from it all the time. Because the thing about creativity is that it only exists in the present moment. Like joy and play, connection, vulnerability, and what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the father of positive psychology, calls flow. It can only be accessed in the present moment, which is why it can feel so elusive to us as adults, especially in our fast-paced, product-focused, accomplishment-driven Western society and developed world. So in this way, creativity is a paradox, like a koan, because in order to engage with it, we can't be hung up on what the finished product will look like, because it's not our business to know. Art making and creativity is an intuitive process. It's a dance, and it involves letting go and feeling along with the art. It involves our extra senses and knowingness to trust what to do or use next. In short, it's about process, not product. And above all, not controlling the process to reach a certain outcome. As soon as we start trying to control it, we are out of the present moment and we turn off the creative tap. You may know you're no longer connected with your creativity by familiar signs such as anxiety, perfectionism, comparison, inner criticism, etc. And we start trying to think our way through the creative process instead of feel it. Nothing kills creativity faster than trying to control or force it. Therefore, engaging with creativity requires a willingness to surrender. It is starting with an intention and then opening to being guided towards an unforeseen result and letting go. Bobby said it so beautifully last week when speaking about mandalas. Let your pencil guide you. Now, for some of us, this is easier said than done. But this is where it becomes a practice. I put myself in this camp. The thing about engaging with creativity is that the desire to play, express, or create must be more than the fear holding us back. Only then will we be willing to surrender to the process and trust that whatever needs to come out will come out. Then we're in an understanding that we are not the art makers, but the vehicle or channel for it. As a trained art therapist and recovering art major, I have only just begun within the last 3 to 4 years to learn how to let go and surrender myself to creativity. This is new for me, and it is a constant, conscious process. I say recovering art major because art therapy, unlike formal art training, is largely about letting go and letting the art happen. And it's taken me having to unlearn my art training to be present enough to let it be, to feel through the art making instead of think through it. This unlearning is hard and beautiful. What's more, it has brought me back to the sacredness I felt with art making as a kid, and the reason why I loved creating in the first place. Maybe you know what I'm talking about and can recall this feeling too when making something just for you. Making a film because you want to. Playing with color because you want to. Moving paint around with a brush, or even better, with your fingers. All the while feeling a sense of grounded fluidity, ease, and joy, all rolled into one. You don't know what's going to happen, and quite frankly, it's immaterial. Russell Brand recently interviewed Judd Apatow, and you can watch the video on YouTube, it's just a couple of days old, about the power of comedy. They're talking about this very thing, about things happening in the creative process that are cosmic. I don't think this is a fluke. I believe something profound and sacred happens when we create. Now, as we're talking about creativity, you might be thinking about the chakras. If you're familiar with the idea of chakras or energy centers in the body, you're probably aware of what's called the sacral chakra, which is second from the base, located in the pelvic region. The understanding is that this is where creativity lives, in the body. However, even if you don't believe this, you might be interested to know that the sacral chakra is so named for the sacrum. The origin of sacrum is Latin from the Greek words sacred bone, because this is where they believed the soul resided. It stands to reason then that perhaps what the Greeks were in touch with when they named the sacred bone was this magic or alchemy that takes place when we create. The sacredness and dance with something bigger. I believe that when we create, we're connecting with the divine, with our own divinity and the divinity of others. And I believe that even when we're creating something alone, whether cooking or gardening or playing an instrument or painting, just quietly by ourselves, that we're actually co-creating. We might notice if we pause in the present moment while creating that we feel connected. Based on my experience, I believe that this is because we are. So, who or what do you feel connected to when you create in the present moment? Yourself? The materials you're touching? The essence of life force or energy within those materials? Maybe you feel connected to all who've come before you, who've done the exact same activity, standing or sitting in the exact same way, making the very same movements. The indigenous nations of North America referred to this as blood memory. Like so many things understood through a feeling and a knowing, it is hard to put into words, but we might describe blood memory as an embodied remembrance passed down through generations. Akin to epigenetics, but including joyful memories as well as darker traumas. And Scott Momaday writes a lot about this. You can look him up. So it's no surprise, to me anyway, that we might feel connected to an ancestor we may not have ever known when we engage in a creative activity that they used to do. And we may find that the activity feels peaceful, comforting, and familiar. So, how do you or will you choose to honor creativity in your practice and be in relationship with it? There's a phrase in art therapy: trust the process. I believe this can be a perfect mantra for engaging with creativity. Because again, how it works and how something turns out is none of our business. We need only trust that we are engaging with something wiser and far more creative than ourselves. But what if we are so in our heads that we're finding it difficult to be in the present moment, to tap into our creativity? What then? Perfect. We can ask creativity to be our ally. In fact, we can art it out, as some of us say. By setting an intention to connect with our emotions, we can use art making to give them a place to rest or to make sense of our current state. Whether we're angry, upset, depressed, anxious, etc., we can use art and other creative activities to help us move through it, with it, mindfully. One way we can do this is by simply assigning each present emotion a color, a shape, and a place to land on a page, for example. We can take it a step further by dialoguing with it, by asking the art what it has to tell us, and then listening and writing it down. If you do this with intention and openness, you might find that your art holds wisdom and can be a helpful guide. We are in a time that is perfect for developing our relationship with creativity. In fact, as we are finding, it's crucial if we are to make the changes we wish to make. As Bobby said last week, we're going to have to get creative to make changes that need to be done in our society. We need to be creative to create the conditions that will be sufficient for these things to manifest. And I forgot my last. So, with that, we can use this talk tonight as a guide. We can set an intention to make creativity our ally. And then we can surrender to the process, believe that we are being held to co-create, and let go.
Thank you for that talk, Anne. I think there were some good comments in the chat box while Anne was talking. It has to do with I think Miles said it well. Flow is mindfulness in motion. Before mindfulness was the buzzword of the day. Yeah, isn't that true? And that word mindfulness too. Sometimes often reminded. The book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. We first heard the word mindfulness maybe, in the mainstream, did we hear it 10 years ago? I'm not sure. We certainly heard it about 5 years ago. The book, The Miracle of Mindfulness, was written in 1979, 30 years ago. So, that flow of creativity and mindfulness, has been going on for such a long time. But what struck me in Anne's talk was thinking about, how does creativity connect me to others? How does it connect me to my ancestors, perhaps? Because, sometimes, depending on what your creative outlet is, sometimes it's an isolated, you do in isolation. It's something you do yourself. But I'm certainly going to be thinking now about how I connect with others through that. And I think something important in the talk that Anne mentioned too, there at the end, how does our creativity play a role in what's going on around us in the world right now, and in society and in our streets? Our mindfulness practice, calls us to be active, and to be active in the process. And our mindfulness practice calls us to stand up for wrongs, and to be a benefit to everyone in society. So, my challenge is maybe think about that in terms of creativity, and thinking what each of us can do to be a positive force in the current world. Let's see. We have a few more comments here, and I'll read them. Mike says, "Great talk, Anne. Loved it." Rita says, "Thank you." Catherine says, "Great talk." Barbara says, "Wonderful concepts. Thanks." Heather says, "Thank you, Anne. It's so helpful to find space to be creative right now." Absolutely. And then Michael has a question that I wonder if you might want to address, Anne. I can. It's, can you explain the difference between artistic and creative? Can you?
That's a great question.
On the
Put me
spot.
on the spot. What's funny is, I had a conversation with my family many years ago about that, and about the difference that I was sort of ruminating with, tossing around, reflecting about the difference between artisticness, or artistic ability, and creativity. And at the time, I think I had it backwards, because what I came to was that maybe it's limited to a few. That maybe creativity is limited to a few, but everyone is artistic. And then I thought, well, maybe it's flipped, and everyone is creative, and maybe only some people cultivate their artistic ability, or maybe that's only nurtured within some of us. But honestly, as I get older, and as I explore these concepts, and speak with others and work with others, I think this is a falsehood, that we have been led to believe, especially in our society, that artistic ability is something gifted only to the few. And I think this falsehood does two things. It cuts us off one way if we think that, well, we're not the recipient of that, and I can only draw stick figures, etc. I can't draw a straight line to save my life. I hear these things a lot. And what I have come to believe is that, well, that's one way we can cut ourselves off, by believing that when it wasn't nurtured in our house growing up. Or the opposite, which is maybe we've got a message that we were one of the few that got this gift, and gosh darn, we better use it and be the best. And so then it adds another kind of pressure. And both of these pull us away from the central core light, if you will, that we all have this ability. And that just like music or athleticism or any other talent or gift, I find that it's the hours you put in to developing it that makes the difference of whether you're good or not. of whether someone is artistic or not, because it can be taught. And I think maybe that's the difference, is that our artistic ability is something learned, whereas creativity is innate. I'll go with that.
Ooh, I knew there was a reason I passed it over to you, Anne. Came to a big conclusion there. Yeah, my addition that I was going to add is that, often we equate creativity and artistic ability. But I think there's, and Anne's talked about this, there's creativity in so many other ways too. We make creative decisions at our job every day. Whether it's, maybe we're a counselor, or maybe we're working with coworkers, maybe we are answering phones, but we are creative in, how we answer or how we resolve conflict. Or we can also be creative when we're in a situation that is challenging for us. For example, a job that maybe we don't like so much. We're creative in, how do I get through this day? I say that kind of as a joke, but no, not really. We make all these decisions. And so there's creativity shows up in so many forms. One time when we did a talk on creativity, I mentioned other occupations, and this one is a kind of a funny joke, because I had mentioned, whatever our work is, we might be a musician, we might be an accountant, we might be a psychologist. And someone in our Sangha said, if I have a creative accountant, I might be going to jail. And it's like, creativity and accounting. Well, yeah, I found that, the funny joke there, but, anyway, just wanted to say, we're so creative in so many ways. So this is great. We sort of had our part of our sharing circle online tonight in YouTube. So we have some great discussion over in the chat window. So I invite you to have a look over there and stuff as we wrap up. So Rita agrees with you, Anne, and so it's sometimes we just don't believe. Sometimes it's a challenge to believe ourselves. And so thank you for comments. Julie mentioned several things, so I'll invite you over to read through the chat. Really great talk over there. So we'll close here in a second, and just a few announcements. One is that so next week our creativity topic will be music, sort of. Music and many other things, but music and movement. And so sometime during this week, you will receive a link to a mix of music that Jessica is putting together. Jessica, our resident DJ. And it will have some music of some of our musicians that are part of our community, and some other things. And your task for this one will be you can use that music as a meditation. You can use that music to get up and dance. You can use that music to do your work by. You can even use that music to do last week's homework with the gathas and haiku and the mandalas. And then just a little hint of the week after that will be about photography. And so you can be one of those students who does your homework a week earlier than everyone else and start working on photography. And then something I'd like to invite, besides our connections to ourselves, our ancestors and stuff, I think, also look at our connections and what we can do to be active in the unrest that's happening in our society and in our country. That might be an area of consideration, and maybe that will spending some time with music and creativity and art and photography. Maybe there can be some seed of realization in there for me or for you or others. So you'll get more information in email this week. So, but I guess. I think, was there any other announcements tonight, Bobby? I think we covered. So have a look somewhere up in the chat. There's the Zoom link, and if it's in my paste buffer, here it comes again. There it is. There's the Zoom link. Will be there shortly. Remember that our community is fully supported by donations from the community, and that community is me and you. And it is a challenging time for us not meeting and having events at our center. So thank you to those who have been continuing to give your gifts to help keep this place operating and keep all of the bills paid that continue happening. And so thank you for that. And you can find the links for donating down in the description of this video, but it's dallasmeditationcenter.com/give, or text the word mindful to 44321. But let's close. And after we close, give us a moment or two to get the Zoom meeting started up. I'll probably start it up from here and pass it over to Bobby. But we will have 2 bells followed by our closing chant, the 4 vows of awakening beings. Countless beings we vow to free, ceaseless afflictions we vow to end, limitless truth doors we vow to open, the deepest paths of awakening we vow to realize. Have a good evening, everyone, and I look forward to seeing many of you continue this conversation over in Zoom.